Good morning or afternoon, everybody, and thank you for attending Elastio's webinar presentation of why a secure data vault is a business imperative and how to make sure the data contained within is clean and recoverable. My name is Todd Frederick. I run the alliances here for Elastio, and I'll be your host today. We're excited to have you here. So first off, Elastio ensures clean recovery of your data in minutes and not months. And what we've done is we've actually reverse engineered over 2,200 ransomware families and identifying over 10,000 of their variants in the field. Our scans of your data volumes are 99.9% accurate, and to date, we've scanned over 28 billion files and counting in the cloud. And we're excited to be here to talk to you about this. You know, ransomware does not discriminate. It attacks companies of all sizes, shapes, and industries across the board. And Elastio is designed to protect the data that is stored by those customers in the cloud or on-premise or wherever that data may be to help them mitigate the risk of a catastrophic ransomware threat. Ransomware has become a pandemic. It's a matter of when, not if, there's going to be an attack on your business and organization. And as a result, Elastio has partnered with AWS to bring a joint solution to market that allows us to interrogate and scan AWS data vaults for indicators of ransomware and protecting your business. And today I'm excited to introduce our speakers. We have from AWS, we have Tom Tasker. He's a senior solutions storage architect for focusing on the AWS financial services market. The global financial services market really is taking the lead in the industry, looking to identify and build best practices for ransomware protection. If you think about it, these organizations are protecting trillions of dollars a day and trillions of transactions around the world. And security is extremely important for them, as well as protecting themselves from ransomware. And I'm also proud to introduce Naj Hussain. Naj is the CEO and co-founder of Elastio. He's a serial entrepreneur with over 20 plus years of experience in the data protection market. And with that, I'm pleased to turn it over to Tom. Tom, welcome.
Brilliant. Thanks, Todd. So what I'd like to do just at this point is just spend about 10 minutes or so going through what we see at AWS, but not just all about AWS. What we're seeing with our customers, of course, with yourselves, with our partners in this space, but also what we're seeing from other teams inside of AWS, but also from the industry and from the regulator as well. So if I approach the first one, and look, it's easy to go out there and find numbers on the internet that kind of match what you're looking to find, right? You can find a fat figure or percentage that kind of goes with you along with your train of thought. But what is the thing that I like to draw down on this one is, apart from the kind of numbers here that we have, you know, in the trillions and the high percentages, is actually the logos on the right-hand side. And one of the things we're noticing, and it has become kind of fairly evident, is that, you know, if you only have to look in the media now to see that attacks, cyber events, predominantly ransomware attacks, are front and center of the mainstream media. But it's also being picked up in the industry. More and more technology companies that maybe traditionally weren't associated with that kind of traditional ransomware attack, cyber event, etc., are also getting in on the mix. And again, just because, you know, I'm based out of London and Europe's just across the water, there's a logo there from ENISA, the European Union Agency for Cyber Security. And so you're also getting these authoritative and these kind of legislative bodies also looking into these ransomware attacks as well and releasing guidance, and also, you know, just kind of trying to get a handle on what's going on here. So if we see that through the industry, especially myself, you know, focused very much on global financial services, we also see the regulators very much taking an interest in this as well. So over in the US, we, you know, for those of you that are familiar, Sheltered Harbor kind of very much being the original, but we also have now the New York State Department of Financial Services, so NYDFS, and they're releasing guidance around backups and the security of those. Again, close to home, we also have the cross-market operational resiliency group, or kind of semi kind of a forum under the Bank of England, if you will, who are focused on making sure that all financial institutions inside of the UK have this common resiliency platform. They released a reference architecture for a cloud-hosted data vault. And again, inside of Europe as a whole, you've got DORA just coming over the hill. So very much something that's going to be focused on that resiliency aspect as well. And then our friends over in APJ, you've got the Hong Kong Association of Banks and the Hong Kong Monetary Authority releasing guidance on secure tertiary data backups. Now, again, if you're not focused on financial services, it's very easy to kind of just fade out at this point, kind of look away, not my vertical, not my interest. I'm not really doing anything in that space. But what I would do is just say, bring your attention back to this and say, where financial services lead, others are very quick to follow. And I saw an article, I think, at the start of this year, and I've got to go and check it. So I'm not sure kind of, how weighty it is. But if you think around financial services, trying to make sure that that industry is robust and making sure that every organization is protected, there's something around a Sarbanes-Oxley, so SOX for those of you that still remember doing that in the workplace, and just making sure that there is this kind of rubber stamp, this scout badge, this tick box that says that I have sufficient cyber event recovery principles in place to keep my organization going. So yes, a bunch of logos here, very much focused on regulatory and financial services. But if you look into that crystal ball, it doesn't take much of a guess, or you don't have to look too far to see how this could start to play out across not just across the verticals, but businesses and industries as we go forward. Of course, feedback from customers is the cloud does what the cloud does best, and that's being able to have speed of implementation, regions already pre-built with services, the resilience and the durability in place, being able to have that agility of being able to take this kind of modular approach. We'll deploy it, we'll see if it works. If it doesn't, we can delete it and walk away, etc. And hopefully it's a cost-effective model as well. You know what those costs are going to look like up front. You can monitor those, you can track those. It's not a big spend all in one go. You can absolutely plan and see where those are going, and actually draw back as well if you do find costs are moving in the wrong direction. So again, kind of just comparing that to that kind of traditional model of purchase orders, going out there and finding space in the data centers. How do you get things through shipping, etc. Just hopefully the cloud brings that a little bit close to home. So if we know that that's happening kind of in the industry, we can see the regulators moving in financial services and potentially in other spaces, and hopefully the cloud is bringing that agility. Why do we need a data vault? And cyber recovery insurance is one of those things that's kind of doing the rounds at the moment. But I kind of see two aspects to this. The first aspect is having that insurance with regards to an attack, and how do you potentially get some money back out of that to be able to recover. But the other one is, how do you get insured potentially? And again, if you look at Zurich, the Zurich CEO saying cyber attacks will become uninsurable, and cyber insurance potentially making the problem even worse from the World Economic Forum. And again, just a snippet from Lloyd's, again, it's just focused on that financial services aspect. But again, if you kind of mirror this with if you were to do this in the physical space, if you went and built a data center on a floodplain, on a fault line with no fire suppression, and said to the building's insurance company, is it all right if I have some insurance? They may look at you and decide that you may not be the best risk to be able to be insuring against. And you can see exactly the same thing happening with just kind of organizations and actually getting insurance as a whole. So what are we protecting from today? And again, this comes from us, we have this slide because we spoke to a CISO, and kind of originally we were out there saying, it's ransomware this and it's ransomware that, and that's absolutely correct. It is the form that is in the media the most, but actually what we're looking at is protecting in an organization's operational environment, how they function on a day-to-day basis. So that's not just ransomware, that's malware, that's false data injection, that's wiper attacks, that's just people wanting to see the world burn, causing disruption, causing mayhem. And the actors haven't always got to be nation states. It could just be the well-meaning employee. They go to the internet because they need to, there's a certain document they can't read from an email. The IT department's not playing ball and giving them access to the software they need in time. There's deadlines. And again, that just well-meaning employee goes out to the internet, downloads the reader, doesn't think there's any harm in it. Their document opens up, but in the back end, this nasty thing is shuffling around and starting to cause a nuisance inside of the organization. So yes, nation state and ransomware, but we really want to be focusing on the full gambit when it comes to protecting our operational environment and cyber recovery. I took this actually from a CMorg resilience conference that we went to, which is actually what are we protecting from tomorrow? So I'd love to kind of say this is all my idea, all my thinking, etc., but it's really not. This is just me turning a load of hand scribbled notes into a PowerPoint presentation. But I thought it was really interesting that just keeping one eye on the future and what that potentially holds. And we think about this idea of data harvesting. So at the moment, encryption, if done well and properly, is uncrackable because we simply don't have the amount of compute on the planet to be able to crack it. But that doesn't mean that the bad actors can't harvest this data. And once quantum computing can have enough qubits put in a row and can crack those big prime numbers, suddenly all of that data that is unbreakable and encrypted and is no use to anybody suddenly becomes available. It's plain text. We're able to see all of the data that's in there. Now, if you have these huge amounts of data sets, it's not just the good guys that like to be able to use AI/ML or generative AI and be able to ask those questions. Suddenly you have these huge data sets that were previously uncrackable that are cracked. And you have tools that didn't exist just a few years ago, really, being able to now take all of that data and start to enrich it and start to make something useful out of that, so that you can then start to look at dependency mapping. And what we mean by that is that if you'd like to go and disrupt an organization, today it may be a direct attack. But actually, if you're able to take huge amounts of data, gain insights from that quicker than you've ever been able to do previously, and ask very simple questions like, how does, what's this organization's shipping manifest looks like? And suddenly you find a bunch of widgets that are made in an organization that's not protected. You can start to see these daisy chains of events. You can start to see how you don't have to go direct, you can go indirect, and all of these things that we didn't think about before. So again, it is just keeping one eye on the future and maybe, just a bit of food for thought. But I thought this was kind of really interesting about how we want to protect today, but we absolutely have to keep one eye on the future and how we're looking to do that. So what are we asking for customers then? Well, we want them to build on their operational resiliency. And the way that I think about presenting this to a customer is if you have, traditional technology stacks of compute, network, and storage, and your business services run across these, the cloud gets introduced and it changes that dynamic slightly. Now, of course, we don't get rid of compute, network, and storage, but we think about how we deploy that in the cloud slightly differently. And this is exactly the same tale with operational resilience. Operational resilience is a week-long topic on its own for sure, but just kind of in this kind of window and this context, we have backup, business continuity, and disaster recovery, and we have our business services aligned to that to make sure recovery is possible. And what we want to introduce is this idea then of cyber recovery. And cyber recovery then is, again, we can still use the same aspects of backup, business continuity, and disaster recovery. But if we just take the same old tools and try and do the same old things, we're going to get a bad result. The same way if you try and take the same old concepts of compute, network, and storage and run them through the cloud, it's not going to be the most efficient. So why do we want to do this with cyber event recovery? Why do we need this cyber vault, this cloud-hosted data vault, to be able to bolster our operational resilience? And the easiest way I found to kind of articulate this is if you look at the kind of traditional backup BCDR as we have today, that's very much focused on recovery. We assume that 90% of the environment is available, give or take, and that we're only bringing 10% of that environment back if something should happen. Focusing on cyber recovery and a cloud-hosted data vault, what we're very much focusing on here is that rebuild aspect. How are we able to bring back our backups? How are we able to bring back our domain controllers, our network switches, not just our servers, but also the applications, the operating systems, and all that kind of governance that goes around it. So I hope I've managed to do a semi-reasonable job of positioning what we're seeing from the industry, the regulator, from our customers, how outside forces and different changes in the landscape for businesses are coming along, and how AWS, we really want customers to focus on cyber recovery and hopefully how a cloud-hosted data vault can help an organization come back should the worst happen. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom. This is Nash Hussain, CEO of Elastio. Tom was just discussing the importance of the cyber vault and being able to bring back domain controllers and data while making sure that that data is clean, uncompromised, and recoverable. Well, at Elastio, that's what we really focus on, making sure that data is clean and recoverable at all times. We work with hundreds of customers, and many of them share similar views on the risks of ransomware. Let me walk through some of those right now. The first myth is perimeter security alone eliminates my risk of ransomware. So perimeter security, while it's imperative, you must have it, and you should have it. is porous in a way that the bad guys now are getting really, really smart, and they're able now to bypass endpoint protection. So with the more advanced ransomware that's out there today, they can just bypass it and end up getting to your data. So that's a risk that needs to be eliminated. 2, anomaly detection eliminates my risk of ransomware. So anomaly detection really talks about looking at high-level information, things like entropy, have files changed, have files been added to the system or not, just indicators of compromise, but they're not prescriptive, and they can't detect ransomware. And that's the problem. In order to detect ransomware, you got to deeply inspect the contents of the files, and that's not what anomaly detection does. So it's riddled with high false positives. So that's the problem with anomaly detection. Immutability and air gap eliminates my risk of ransomware. While immutability and air gap are important concepts to protect against ransomware, immutability and air gap alone don't reduce my risk. The issue is immutability is very good to stop the bad guys from deleting a backup. Great. You want to make sure you have immutable backups. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't understand the contents of the backup. So what needs to happen is that the contents of the backup need to be checked to make sure that the data that you're making immutable is actually recoverable. And that's the issue with immutability and air gapping alone. So that one's false. Number 4, on-prem legacy solutions eliminate my risk of ransomware. So many legacy data protection products today offer anomaly detection, immutability, and some with air gap. But those alone, as we spoke about earlier, don't eliminate my risk of ransomware. You must deeply inspect the data to determine if you have ransomware inside of that data. There's no way around it. So this one is false. And the 5th one's around the cloud is secure and eliminates my risk of ransomware. So as you know, public clouds offer a shared responsibility model. So it is the responsibility of the hyperscaler to make sure that the infrastructure is secure. So that part is handled by the hyperscaler. The part that's the responsibility of the customer is to make sure that the application is secure. So that's your responsibility. So things like making sure your data is protected, making sure your data is scanned for ransomware and malware, making sure your data is immutable is all the responsibility of the customer. This myth is false as well. So let's talk about how we actually do this. So Elastio has taken a multi-step process. So the first thing we did is we went after and reverse engineered all the known ransomware families. So there's over 2,200 of them and counting. And we actually detonated them, neutered them. We understand the control paths. We understand how they affect the systems down to the assembler code. So we did that over the last 3 years, and we've become very, very good at analyzing ransomware. So what we've done with that is we've applied high-dimensional statistical analysis to that data, and we came up with an ML model that's very accurate with a very low false positive rate in detecting ransomware inside of the data. We're actually so good now, we're in the range of 5 false positive for 10 million scans. We've done over 30 billion scans now, so the platform is highly tested, and the false positive rate is spectacular. So the way we've built this model is that if you have ransomware inside of your data, a high probability we're going to find it. And as a matter of fact, we find between 20 and 30 new ransomware families and variants per week. And most of those are models detect successfully. And the ones that we don't detect, we obviously update the model, and that becomes available on the next scans for our customers. It becomes available within days of sometimes within a single day of when we've detected the new variant. We also do overtime analysis. This is an important concept. Overtime analysis talks about comparing the data between particular snapshots, so we can go back in time and compare it to the most current one. And because of that, the ransomware actors are super smart now. So they're able to circumvent the basic anomaly detection today. Most all of them do now. So you have to really look at changes over time as an indicator. So you can do that now, scanning across snapshots. So that's an important capability that we have to find the most advanced ransomware. So now let's talk a little bit about the types of ransomware that we're seeing, the different types of families and how they're getting more and more sophisticated. So the simple anomaly detection, simple encryption approach, anomaly detection can pick those up. Royal, ransomware, EXX, very standard old school type ransomware. But we're now starting to see some more sophisticated ransomware, things like lockfile, which is partial encryption. So it's slow entropy. So that means anomaly detection won't pick those up because they'll just partially encrypt certain files or pieces of files over time. So that can happen over weeks or months even, and the anomaly detection won't pick that up. Zorist is another one where metadata becomes unchanged. So thinking about how you're going to determine if metadata is unchanged, you need to be able to see point in times then, right? You need to be able to go back in time to see what's going on there. So Zorist is a particularly difficult one to find. So, and without the overtime analysis, it becomes nearly impossible. And more of these ransomware actors now are starting to use more of these advanced techniques because the current systems today, including XDR, in some cases can't pick these up. Alcatraz locker is another one, base 64 encoding. That means you have to inspect the contents. So you got to get inside the file. So typically when you're dealing with XDR, for example, while they're very good at stopping some level of breaches, it's very difficult for them to put the compute power into scanning that data because it takes a lot away from the production application. So because we do side scanning and we're scanning, off host, we can now take our time and deeply inspect that data without impacting production and actually find ransomware inside of that data. Time's another interesting one where it's very difficult. It's slow encryption. So they'll encrypt very slow over time. So that's where that overtime analysis comes into play as well. Crypto mix, rename encrypted files. It's very hard to match those. And that's again why advanced ML and overtime analysis becomes imperative. So the message here is, look, the ransomware actors are getting very, very smart because it's so profitable. So they're using more and more advanced techniques to encrypt the data so they can't be circumvented. They can produce the most damage and ultimately collect the highest amount of ransom. So that's what we do really well. We make sure that we deeply inspect that data and we try to stay a step ahead of the bad guys. And so far we feel like we've done a pretty good job at that. So let's walk through our four-step workflow. So it starts with protect, detect, respond, and recover. So let's talk about protect. So first of all, our platform's agentless on AWS. It's agentless on VMware as well. On AWS, we protect services like EC2, EBS, AMIs, ECS, EKS container implementations. S3 buckets are an important one. So we do, block, file, and object. EFS and FSX come for the ride. So anywhere where files can be deposited or stored or exploited, that's where we target. So anything where files are kept. And also, we support existing backup systems like AWS Backup, Veeam, Commvault, Zerto, NetBackup. So they can be running either on VMware environments and or AWS. At the end of this quarter, we'll have Azure as well as another platform that we'll go after. So many of our customers are on multiple platforms today. On the detect side, we do deep file scans for attacks. So we spoke about this a little bit. We have a library of over 2,200 ransomware families with over 10K variants. Some of these families have 10 variants. Some of them have over 1,000 variants. So depending on the ransomware. And our ML engine is built for accurate detection, as we really focused hard on that. So some of the things we identify as part of the platform, we look for storage misconfigurations as well, external data exposure, exposed data, unprotected data we can track as well, unscanned data obviously we can track as well. So you get the dashboard and reporting on that so you can know exactly what your threat exposure is, and you can also know obviously the recoverability of your data at any given point in time. The respond piece is critical. We have an incident response team that looks at all the events and then does the research behind those alerts and make sure that they're not false positives. So we do that work up front for our customers. If it indeed is a ransomware infection or active malware, we will go and go back to the customer with that information to say, yep, this alert that you received is not a false positive, and indeed it's CLOP or it's some type of ransomware that you should take recovery actions on immediately. And obviously, our team will work with your threat teams on the recovery side of the process. We also integrate with CI/CD pipelines. We can automate through any type of orchestration, literally. We can also send these alerts to your favorite SIEM By default, we send a security hub, AWS security hub, and then by there it can be distributed to PagerDuty, Snow, ServiceNow, et cetera. Or we have direct webhook integration with the most common platforms. On the recovery side, and actually the most important piece is fast point-in-time restoration. So we can quickly identify the last known clean, recover that either that workload, that volume, that file to the right clean version, and you can do this literally in minutes. We also have live recovery capabilities built in, near live capabilities, where you can restore these very large data sets very quickly and get back into production as soon as possible after a ransomware attack. We can also restore these infected data into sandboxes for the forensics team. And because we have things like global dedupe and compression built into our backend cyber vault as an option, you can also keep a long tail of information, of data around for the forensics team, 6 months to a year, for example, very cost effectively. So the threat intelligence team can now go back in time and start to hunt for when these kind of incidents may have started to occur. Some of the threats that we find have very, very long dwell times that are 90 days and beyond. And you might, the intelligence team, the threat intel teams may need to go back in time and start looking at data sets, or maybe where a vulnerability was exposed, 9 months ago in a certain set of instances, for example. And that's how the bad guys entered into the system. So that's all baked into the platform as well. So architecturally, we integrate seamlessly with the AWS ecosystem. So we integrate with native AWS snapshots and also AWS Backup Vault. So wherever the AWS Backup Vault may live, whether it's close to the workload account, within maybe a replicated environment in a different region, and or the bunker account, which is one of the more the newer architectural constructs of AWS Backup, you can deploy us in either or all of those. It's totally up to the use case. Many customers deploy us in the workload account to do the scans up front before that data is replicated and or before it's sent to the bunker. Some customers make it immutable first and then scan the data. So that's totally up to the customer on which approach they'd like to take. The integration is done through a simple Lambda and an event bridge. So the process is you deploy Elastio inside of your region inside of your VPC. So when we do our scans, the data never leaves the customer account. And then the implementation is very straightforward. It happens through a tag that you add to a AWS backup policy. Once that tag is entered there, and that Lambda's trigger after the AWS backup recovery point is created, we will then pick it up and scan it automatically. And then the results by default go to AWS Security Hub. You can also send it to S3 buckets or to any of your favorite platforms through a webhook and or through a Lambda. So we have many examples about how to integrate this. So the Elastio 5. So these are the 5 things I'd love you to remember about Elastio. And here we go. So Elastio is the only solution that detects ransomware in live data and backups. That's an important concept. So we can also run against live workloads. So we can scan live EC2 instances, take a snapshot, scan them, and give you the results as an example. We can also scan live EFS or FSX file systems or live S3 buckets. All that comes for the ride. You also can scan in the restore test from AWS Backup. So you can integrate us there. So the restore test is implemented. You do a restore of that data set. You can then institute a scan at that point. So that's supported as well. What we do really well is we assure that your data is clean, uncompromised, and recoverable at all times. And you can recover that data literally in minutes and not days or months. That's a big value proposition. Number 3, Elastio protects multi-cloud and hybrid environments. So we're very good on AWS. That's where we started. We have very mature in that platform. We're also moving into Azure as we speak. We'll have the first solution there at the end of Q1. And we do support VMware with multiple different backup products today. Number 4, Elastio protects against ransomware that bypasses XDR. and EDR agents. So that's an upcoming threat now. So we're seeing it over and over again. For example, the city of Dallas was just that exploit. So the ransomware guys, remember, they're getting very smart now because there's so much, it's so lucrative. So they're doing some very advanced techniques now to bypass, endpoint protection. So we're not saying don't have that endpoint protection. You must. They're very good, and they stop a lot of attacks, but they do get bypassed. So and that will happen. So in that case, you want to make sure that that data layer that you have is being watched and protected, and that's what Elastio does. Number 5, we operate within your account and within your VPCs. The data never leaves your account. So in summary, that's what Elastio does. I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Naj. My name is Walter Sacco, and I want to give you guys a quick demo of the product so you can see it in action. So I want to start with the fact that we've been doing the research on the ransomware so that when you get a specific notification to whatever notification platforms you're working with, and you see that Elastio has detected this particular ransomware or malware in an AWS backup or any sort of backup that you're taking, when you see those findings, we'll be able to tell you exactly what that malware is, what that ransomware is, what path it's on, and in which backup we found that in. So when you go over to Elastio and you're looking at the dashboard, now you can quickly see at a glance that, okay, this is not a good scenario. I've got 4 active ransomware, 8 active malware. Luckily, the file systems are all intact, so I know that all my backups are recoverable. So what we can do from here is we'll go in and let's say I want to restore my file server back to a last known clean. I can see the backups that Elastio has taken, the ones that AWS's backup has taken and that we've scanned. And inside of more details, we're able to look directly and tell you which file, which folder is infected with what ransomware strain. So you'll know the exact strain. It's not just going to say, well, there's an anomaly in the latest backup. Please try an older one. What we'll be able to tell you is exactly what you have, where you have it, and you'd be able to restore to the last known clean recovery point. So we're scanning each of these snapshots or backups that you're taking, and we know that, okay, we have a clean. Now, today we have a dirty, so we know that yesterday's backup was clean, and we'll give you that recovery point to go back to. So as simple as that, we're monitoring every snapshot or backup that you're taking, running the scans and giving you ideally a clean bill of health. But if not, we'll let you know when the last clean bill of health was and where you can recover to. So I just want to say thank you guys very much. I'm going to pass it back over to Todd to finish up.
Thank you, Walter. Great demo. Very much appreciated. Well, everybody, thank you for attending today's webinar. I hope you found this to be useful and informative. If you'd like to see and learn more about Elastio and how we can help identify and protect you from ransomware attacks and ensure the recoverability of your data, we'd love to schedule a briefing and have a one-off conversation with you. Our team will be emailing you different sets of resources to follow up with, and you can always visit us online at elastio.com. Please feel free to contact me directly should you want something set up more urgently. You can reach me at Todd, T-O-D-D, at elastio.com. Thank you, everybody, and hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Take care.
All right. Thanks, guys. My name is Walter Sacco. I'm here with Naj. You heard our voices, just a few minutes ago, but we're here to do some Q&A. We actually have a lot of questions and a lot of people thanking us for the great presentation. So thank you guys for joining. Appreciate that. Naj, I want to start with this one we've gotten a few times. What are the frequency of the scans and are they continuous?
Yeah, good question. So yes, you can control this with a policy within Elastio. So they are continuous. You can decide how often you want to do the scans. So they can be done every 15 minutes, every hour, every day, whatever the business requirement needs.
So they can be pretty frequently. Do these scans affect production at all?
Yeah, so they don't. So we run as an agentless platform. So we do something we call side scanning. So we either read existing snapshots or create new ones and do the scan against it. So it happens off the production server. So there's no impact to the production at all. And then that allows us to do the deep file inspection that we need to do to detect ransomware within the data.
So with the detection piece, do we have a list of the services that we scan on AWS?
Yeah, so anything where files are kept is what we scan. So obviously EC2 and EBS, that's a block storage. EFS and FSX, that's the file storage side. Of course, S3. We also do containers with EKS and ECS. That comes for the ride as well. So all those are included in the platform.
Yeah, so really anywhere files can get in there. Do we have performance numbers? People are asking about, how quickly are we doing scans?
Yeah. So we typically on a system with a terabyte, say, of data, 500,000 files takes between 10 to 12 minutes or so to get through the scan. So it's fairly efficient, and that includes the analysis that we need to do to detect ransomware.
It's pretty deep analysis. Yeah. So we did get this question multiple times. So where are you guys finding the ransomware? How do you keep up to date with the ever-changing threat landscape?
Right. So we use open source, connections that we have. We use VirusTotal, obviously, but we also are in where the bad guys are as well. So we're able to get new and upcoming threats. As a matter of fact, as you heard on the webcast, that we get between 20 and 30 new ones a week. So they come from that area, and from that we're able to run that against our models. We do very well with our current ML models, so we're in the 90+% of detecting unknown ransomware that we find, and then the ones that we don't, we include back in the model and ship them to our customers. They typically get them in the next day or so.
Very nice. Okay, so here's a good one. We're running an AWS bunker architecture across 2 regions and a bunker. What do you recommend in terms of when to do ransomware scanning?
So it really depends. So most of our customers do the scan on the workload side. So before they push it in to make it immutable. So they scan it up front, and then based on the condition, if it's clean or not. If it's clean, obviously they push it to the bunker and make it immutable. If it's not clean, they can take an action against that, meaning not move it to the bunker and then remediate the issue. So some customers, however, run it, they put it in the bunker, lock it down with immutability, and then do the scan at that point. And they keep the kind of quarantined recovery point available for the sandbox activity. Makes sense. They've got options. Let's see, there's one last question. So are you seeing any more interest from a particular industry or industries? Ransomware is so pervasive now. They're hitting anywhere where there's deep pockets, they're going to go after. So we're seeing it in fintech, healthcare, hotels, gaming. We're seeing a lot of gaming now as well. So it's fairly universal. And I think that most businesses are going to need some level of ransomware protection, because it's really not a matter of if, but when. And it's up 72% year over year. So it's not slowing down any. Seeing new hits every day. Yeah. But I think that's it for the questions. So I guess that's it from us. Thank you guys very much for joining. Thank you. Take care.